What's going on, everybody? This is Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online, joined by senior reporter Zach Albaverdi of Gators Online. And this is the Gators Online rapid reaction to Florida's loss to number 2 Georgia in Jacksonville today, 34-20. We're going to break down a lot of what happened out at Everbank Stadium today with Zach. But Zach, obviously what is on everybody's mind right now is DJ Lagway, Florida starting quarterback. He went down in the second quarter with a hamstring injury. What can you tell us?
Well, right now, Florida is waiting on Sunday to arrive so that they can give him an MRI. This is a hamstring injury that Billy Napier described as one significant and also to a soft tissue. And because of that, he says it's sometimes subjective as to how long players could be out. But it does seem like this might not be a season-ending injury for Lagway, maybe something that keeps him out of his game next week, which is his return to his home state. But look, Florida, as Tim Tebow said on SEC Nation today, Keith, its path to victory was going to run through DJ Lagway. And once he got injured, their chances of pulling off this upset dramatically decreased. Despite that, they were still in this game in the fourth quarter, tied it up late, and showed, I think, more fight than maybe anybody would have expected from them, considering the amount of injuries that they sustained today.
Yeah, Zach, a crazy game, another wild cocktail party. When you were driving over to Jacksonville this morning, we talked on the phone and you said, Keith, I just got a feeling that it's going to be a weird one. And there haven't been too many more weird than this one, Zach. Let's kind of do the recap here. Final score 34 for number 2 Georgia, 20 for unranked Florida. Georgia, 455 total yards to only 228 for Florida. 26 first downs for Georgia to only 13 for Florida. But an opportunistic Florida defense with 3 interceptions of Carson Beck, former Heisman candidate Carson Beck, as we've been describing him, really gave Florida life in the first half. Georgia was ahead 3-0, was driving. It didn't look good. Then the first of 3 interceptions happened. Shortly thereafter, DJ Lagway hit Aiden Mizell for a 43-yard touchdown. And all of a sudden, Florida not only had life, it had the lead, which it would later extend. But first off, Zach, that opportunistic defense, they gave up a lot of yards and bent a little bit late, but they really kept Florida in the game early.
Yeah, I think it's important to consider that Florida had so many 3-and-outs with Aiden Warner in the second half, and that's where Georgia was able to find some momentum on offense and get a lot of their yards in the second half. For the most part, this defense really kept the Gators in the game with all those injuries, and had Lagway never got hurt, I don't think you're seeing all those 3-and-outs in the second half and Georgia having as many opportunities to put up yards on offense. But nonetheless, Florida forced 3 turnovers in this game. They got stops at times when they needed to, and obviously they couldn't do it at the end when they tied the game at 20. But, I mean, they were just dropping like flies in the secondary. They already came into this game with Jason Marshall and Jakeem Jackson down at cornerback. You had Dejon Johnson making his first career start, and then Devin Moore gets injured on his interception return. Dejon Johnson gets injured in the second half, and Florida went from down 2 starting cornerbacks to down 4 starting cornerbacks, and that presented an opportunity for Cormani McClain to get into the game with the starters. And then after Johnson got hurt, they had to move Triquez Bridges from safety to cornerback, which we reported at Gators Online this week to watch for. That was something that could happen. Indeed, it did. You're talking about a guy in Triquez Bridges who played corner at Oregon his entire career, has spent this season at safety for the Gators, hadn't even practiced at cornerback throughout the week. And the Gators just throw him in there. They also did it against Mississippi State. So this is the first time he's played corner. But that's how much their depth was shot. And despite that, the defense, I mean, Aaron Gates had one hell of a game. He's clearly Florida's best tackler in the secondary. But we'll talk more about the offense, Keith. But you just knew that once Lagway went out, even though Warner did some things despite his inexperience, it was just going to be so hard for Florida to pull this off.
If somebody would have told you before the game, and by the way, there's no moral victories. It's the 4th loss in a row to Georgia. Billy Napier's 0-3 against Georgia. Billy Napier's now 1-10 against his rivals since he got to Florida. So no moral victories. But if somebody would have told you before the game that you'd lose DJ Lagway in the second quarter, and that you'd somehow still be in the game, and in fact tied at 20 all in the fourth quarter with Georgia, you probably wouldn't have believed him. But again, a loss is a loss. Zach, DJ Lagway, when he went out of the game, was only 2 of 6 passing for 47 yards. One of the touchdowns was the 43-yarder, or one of his completions, was the 43-yard touchdown to Aiden Mizell. He also had rushed for 18 yards, but the offense was kind of starting to hum a little bit. The fact that he's like having an extra running back in the backfield presented some real challenges for Georgia, which Florida, until late in the game, really did run effectively on. And so the stats are kind of one of those things you can't really look at too much. When Lagway went out of the game, the whole dynamic of the offense changed. What about the demeanor of the team? I mean, Jack, they still really fought and clawed and scratched their way. I guess that's the one positive, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, when Georgia scored and this stadium started going nuts when they took the lead 2013, I thought that was it. I thought Florida was done for. I thought there was I literally started working on my game story and not really paying attention as much in the fourth quarter because I thought that Florida was done. So for them to go and tie the game late in the fourth at 20 with that touchdown run from Jacoby Jackson, who actually got the start today at running back. We all thought it would be Jaden Baugh. Montrell Johnson practiced this week, but with the knee injury, Napier said he just didn't feel like he was quite ready enough to play. Montrell wanted to play. He went through pregame warmups, dressed out. You could tell that he was frustrated by not being able to get the green light. And that was obviously something that Florida had to deal with on the offensive end. But credit to them for still finding a way, like 3 and out after 3 and out after 3 and out. You mentioned that the difference in the total yardage. I will say, though, Florida's missing about, I don't know, what was it, like 50 yards from their total yards that got taken away off of that botched snap on the field goal that was in UGA territory, got recovered all the way in UF territory, I think like the 36-yard line. Yeah. That cost Florida a lot of yardage, but more importantly, that cost them momentum because at that point, Georgia had tied the game. Florida comes right back down with a chance to regain the lead, and Trey Smack just doesn't get the opportunity to kick it. Florida hasn't had many special teams blunders this year. Obviously, that was something that everybody was watching going into the year. They've really improved that phase of the game, but that one today was a killer. To be able to have, again, the final score was 2 touchdowns, but as we all know, this thing was 20-20 with a few minutes left.
Yeah. Zach, there's probably a pretty good chance going into this game. The casual Gator fan probably didn't know who Aiden Warner was, quite frankly. And Graham Mertz started the season as the starter, rotated some with DJ. Graham got it back after an injury, got hurt himself again. DJ took over and has been, fantastic. Aiden Warner, a redshirt freshman who transferred from Yale, but he's from Winter Park, and his family, a lot of strong family Florida ties. He finished 7 of 22 for 66 yards with an interception, but he did lead Florida on 2 scoring drives, including one at the end of the half where he only had to make a couple of throws, but Florida did get a field goal at the end of the half to sort of regain some momentum. And then there was that touchdown drive that you mentioned. It was mostly running, but he did complete a significant, I want to say second or third down completion for a first down on that drive. But boy, talk about just being thrown. Third string quarterback thrown into that situation, number 2 team in the country, the team that, by the way, just shut out, number one, not shut out, but shut down Texas's number one Texas's offense just a few weeks ago in Austin. And all of a sudden he's out there playing. Admirable, obviously, but what a drop off. And so I guess the question on everybody's mind is, where does Florida go from here if Lagway can't play the next game or the game after? I mean, is Warner definitely the guy? Who's behind him? What's the situation at quarterback?
Well, as Florida fans might remember, Clay Millen was the other quarterback that got added in the 2024 class via the transfer portal. The Gators actually used a scholarship on him to come in and be another backup for the Gators, compete for that third string spot. I don't think there was ever a real shot that he was going to be the number 2 over Lagway, but it turns out that he wasn't even able to lock up the number 3 spot, and was also here in the spring, had that advantage, and Aiden Warner shows up in the summer as a preferred walk-on transfer from Yale and beats out Clay Millen in fall training camp. Pretty impressive because I don't think that that's how Florida drew it up at all. And just 2 weeks ago, he started taking reps with the second team offense after Graham Mertz's season-ending injury. So prior to that, he really hadn't been doing much work at all with the second team unit, and he's kind of been thrust into action. From what I've been told, and this shouldn't come as a surprise, he's a really smart guy coming over as a transfer from Yale. He knows the offense really well, which I think has helped him win this spot over Clay Millen. And then the players love him, from what I've been told. He's well liked on the team, and we'll see what happens with Lagway's MRI on Sunday. If he is able to get healthy in enough time to play in Austin, that would be quite the turnaround. I do think it's probably more likely that Aiden Warner is going to be your starter against Texas.
You know, by the end of the game, the defense, which had been so admirable, it was clear they were a little gassed, and there were some 3-and-outs, and then Georgia got gifted that field position toward the end with the interception of Aiden Warner. But Carson Beck only went 25 of 40, 3 interceptions, 2 touchdown passes. Georgia running back Nate Frazier had 82 rushing yards. Trevor Etienne got injured in the game, the former Gator, and really was a non-factor. He was out, and so they relied on Nate Frazier. He had 82 yards.
I do want to say, though, did you see what was on his eye black, Keith?
Oh no, I didn't. I missed that.
He wore shoot 'em, but it's shoot 'em, S or CHOOT as in shoot. It's a alligator hunting company in Louisiana that he was wearing on his eye black. So a little shot there at the Gators.
Well, Georgia's got some concerns coming out of that game, but back to Florida. Georgia did hold the ball 33 minutes, 30 seconds, and ultimately I think Florida got tired at the end there. Florida's now 4-3, Zach, overall, 2-3 in the SEC. 4-4 overall. Excuse me, 4-4 overall, 2-3 in the SEC. Again, 4 straight losses to Georgia. You know, Billy Napier 1-10 in rivalry games. The only rivalry win he has was last year at home against Tennessee. Now, 10 of the 11 teams of the 11 rivalry games, 10 of the 11 opponents have been ranked. Georgia's been ranked number 1 twice, number 2 coming into this game. But Florida fans don't want to hear that, Zach. You got to win. You got to beat somebody at some point. The next chance for a rivalry game is in a few weeks when Florida plays host to LSU at the Swamp. But, you know, one other thing that we want to talk about, there's so many injuries today, and you brought this up earlier. People are wondering, is it the field? You know, there's some comments here. Is it a strength and conditioning issue? But, Zach, I don't remember too many games like that and too many seasons like this where Florida has lost this many guys. And just, I know you're not a doctor, but what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I asked Billy if he thought the field was an issue, and he said no. Now, if he did think the field was an issue, would he say that publicly at the podium? Probably not.
Yeah.
But it did seem like a lot of guys were having issues keeping their feet underneath them, a lot of guys slipping in the backfield, and obviously the injuries that we saw. I don't necessarily know if you can say it's a strength and conditioning issue for Florida, because Georgia had guys going down on their side as well. I mean, now Florida had more injuries in this game, but only I think Dejon Johnson and Devin Moore, along with Lagway, were the only ones that didn't come back from their injuries. But there was probably a half dozen guys at one point or another. Caleb Banks got hurt and came back in the game. Sharif Denson went down. Jordan Castell went down. So, look, Florida, remember, I don't know if it was, it was last year that Shamar James had his season-ending injury in pregame warmups out here on this field. So I don't know if it's the turf. I don't know if the field was a little wet or slippery today, but the only thing I would equate this to would be the 2013 season for the Gators. This is the only season. That's the only season I can think of where they had this many injuries.
It was such an amazing first half to watch. They fought so hard. They led at the half. They led in the third quarter. They fell behind. They tied it. And you're thinking, as a Gator fan, they're finally after a few years of this, you know, getting punched in the stomach, seemingly every big game, every big moment, every big chance to change the narrative. It felt like maybe it was going to change. So, and it didn't happen. So, Zach, where does the team and where does the program, where does Florida go from here, man? How do they pick up the pieces? This is regardless of what happened, this is I would think a pretty devastating defeat. Certainly is to the fans.
I think that's a good way to put it, because now this team has found themselves twice in a game this season against a top 10 team with a chance to win late in the fourth quarter and unable to get it done. And in both of those games, they lost their starting quarterback on that night or on that day. Now, had things maybe played out differently, I certainly think today would have played out differently if Lagway doesn't get hurt. But that's got to probably eat away at these guys that they've competed now with two of the best teams, at least in the SEC and certainly with Georgia in college football. And injuries have held them back and just not being able to finish. But they are going to have more opportunities to still get a marquee win here in November.
Well, like somebody makes a good point in here. They say, South Carolina had a lot of injuries last year. It's part of the game, and it is. Everybody's got to deal with it. Some years you get through it pretty smoothly.
It's got to be frustrating as a player to know that you feel like as a team you're good enough to beat these squads, and maybe if you were at full capacity, you would have or hadn't had a key injury happen over the course of the game. I mean, you lose your starting quarterback in any game, it's hard to finish it with the win.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. All right, Zach Alberverdi of Gators Online, senior reporter. We appreciate you stopping by, taking the time to chat with us live at Everbank Stadium. You've got some stories coming, so everybody make sure you go to GatorsOnline.com. Tough loss today. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us here. For Zach, I'm Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for coming by.